sex, sweat, secrets.
Human trafficking is slavery.
And it happens all over America.
Through force, fraud, and coercion.
It's sinister people who are paying attention and locking in on the vulnerabilities. They can use this body over and over and over again. And that's why it's so lucrative.
Modern-day slavery that targets men, women, and children of every race and religion.
I am a mother.
I am an author.
I am a son.
Whether it's 1 or 10,000, it shouldn't be happening.
But it is happening right under our noses here in central Pennsylvania.
In your restaurants, in your hotels, it's in our eye, it's in front of us.
Tonight, Fox 43 uncovers the shocking statistics through those standing up, sharing their stories.
She thought that my story might save another person's life.
And working together to break the bonds of servitude in our state.
There is not one agency in our community that can do it all.
Good evening and thanks for joining us for An Invisible Cage, the truth about trafficking in Central PA. I'm Amy Lutz. Tonight we are tackling a troubling topic, a crime that does not discriminate, a danger that is difficult to identify. That's because human trafficking has many faces, diverse victims who have been trafficked by family members, friends, and people promising a better life. They offer love, freedom, and hope. They feed addictions, prey on poverty, and hone in on emotional vulnerabilities. Like so many crimes, when you think about human trafficking, you probably think, not me, not here. But that could not be further from the truth. Trafficking knows no boundaries and bleeds into central Pennsylvania just like every other part of the world. In fact, Pennsylvania is one of the top 10 states for reported cases of human trafficking. So let's take a look at the statistics specific to our state. In the past 5 years, approximately 800 human trafficking offenses were filed in the PA court system. And you have to remember, thousands more are never reported. These include sex trafficking, labor trafficking, and trafficking in minors. The county with the highest number of reported trafficking offenses in Pennsylvania, Lancaster County, right here in central Pennsylvania. Over the next hour, you will hear from survivors, from thrivers, from saviors, and from soldiers. We will help you understand the scope of the problem here in Pennsylvania, how to recognize the warning signs of human trafficking, and how to identify the resources available to turn to. Before we dig in, we want to just explain what human trafficking is, the actual definition, if you will.
Force, fraud, and coercion. Those are the three terms that are used when it comes to human trafficking.
And the three most common types of human trafficking: sex trafficking, debt bondage, meaning you're held hostage to pay off a debt, and forced labor or involuntary servitude, which, according to the Department of State, is the biggest sector of trafficking in the world. But it is difficult to identify, hard to comprehend, and even tougher to take down. That's the challenge facing law enforcement across the state of Pennsylvania, especially those charged with working to unearth the root cause of trafficking and educate others about the nearly invisible signs and symptoms.
Everything that you would see, that you would think would be on television, what you've taken from movies and stuff, like throw that out the window.
This woman is an undercover trooper with the Pennsylvania State Police. We cannot reveal her identity because of the sensitive nature of her job.
And I've been a state trooper for about 9 years now, and I really didn't realize how prevalent this issue is.
She does a dangerous job to save, support, and educate the victims of human trafficking.
Just the sheer amount is shocking. Anybody can be a victim of trafficking. It's not so much, the movie Taken.
Oh my God, they got Amanda!
What? What are you talking about?
The bondage, the ropes around, people's wrists, people getting hauled into vans and things like that. I guess it's more so of a body language between people and different types of signs. They have a lack of knowledge when it comes to their location, travel plans. They take verbal abuse extremely easily. There's so many different types of signs and indicators when it comes to trafficking. Traffickers are good at what they do. They seek out vulnerabilities in specific individuals. The internet acts as a worldwide marketplace. Yeah, you can virtually buy and sell sex anywhere, which is scary. It's also a place where you can find a victim extremely easily. Having social media, people will put anything on there. If they're going through a really hard time at home, lost a job, if they're having a hard time with addiction, and traffickers utilize that in an effort to seek out their victims. Trafficking usually comes down through somebody that's posing as like a trusted friend or a potential love interest. There is also such a thing as familial trafficking, where it's coming through different family members. Not to say that it doesn't happen, but it is very rare that trafficking would happen in any kind of form of abduction. Pennsylvania is huge. First of all, the state is gigantic, but it's vastly filled with interstate travel system. And human trafficking is a transient business, which makes Pennsylvania a huge hub for human trafficking.
So why don't more people know how widespread this problem really is, and why aren't we talking about it more? The woman you're about to meet is working to change that. Jennifer Foxworthy's story is one you have to hear to believe. A retired Navy airman, a woman of color who broke boundaries in the military, a motivational speaker, and a living example of what is possible no matter how dark the days may become.
We're having a conversation. We are getting the word out there.
Jennifer Foxworthy is the founder of Unstoppable You Ministries, a nonprofit she started in 2017 to educate, empower, and inspire men and women to lead whole and healthy lives.
We provide emergency services, public education and training, as well as supportive resources to communities around the country.
Foxworthy first learned about the complexities and scope of the human trafficking issue at a conference back in 2015.
When that detective spoke at the conference and the information she gave, my mind was blown.
Ever since, Foxworthy has included speakers on human trafficking at each of her conferences, working to raise awareness and open eyes across the country.
They don't think it could happen to them. It's that mindset, it's not my problem. This is something that happens in third world countries, but not in America. Although we are one of the biggest consumers of human trafficking when you think of your farmers, when you think of pornography. Pornography is the sex entertainment industry, it fuels the demand for sex trafficking.
She has learned trafficking rears its ugly head in many different forms, but the one thing traffickers are always looking for is a vulnerable victim.
Most of your people that are vulnerable are the ones that are stuck in your juvenile justice systems, that are in and out of adoption and foster care and the detention centers. People who come from single parent homes, especially if they're struggling to make ends meet. And then all of a sudden you have someone who's noticing, well, I can help. You don't want to be put out on the streets, do you? I know a way you can earn money.
A manipulative move that Foxworthy says resonates with her on a personal level.
Because I am a survivor and thriver myself.
Before becoming a motivational speaker and victim advocate, Foxworthy served as a Navy airman. She was the first African-American female in the enlisted ranks and flew dozens of combat missions during her 20-year career. She is also a survivor of domestic violence. Violence she endured during a 5-year relationship with another service member.
Now I'm dealing with a personal war of service member on service member abuse. I'm experiencing workplace bullying because I'm trying to fit in where I stand out. And I flew combat missions in 3 different wars: Kosovo, Afghanistan, and Iraq. I had to compartmentalize just to stay alive.
Jennifer did survive, overcoming adversity in the most trying circumstances. Now she's sharing her story, setting an example of resilience and empowerment, and spreading her message in hopes of helping others escape the trauma she endured.
We really support those who are affected, so individuals and families that are dealing with domestic violence, human trafficking, and homelessness. And what I want people to know is that one person can experience all three.
So you see, human trafficking doesn't happen in a vacuum. Traffickers prey on the most vulnerable members of our community, the abused, the neglected, the beat down and broken.
The electrocution, the drowning, being shot at, the different aspects of, what that really does to a child. I mean, that was all under the age of 11.
Traumatized and trafficked. The warning signs were there, but every adult in her life made one critical mistake.
If somebody's telling you that they're being abused, you probably shouldn't be going to the abuser to find out if it's true.
How she finally broke free, turned her trauma into triumph, and started helping other victims of violence turn their lives around. Plus, justice and hope, the difficult decision one victim had to make and how it changed her life for the better. And remember, there is help out there. If you suspect someone you know or love may be the victim of human trafficking, you can call the National Human Trafficking Hotline. The number is right there on your screen. Plus, over the next hour, we'll be sharing additional resources for victims, survivors, and their families available right now, right here in Central Pennsylvania.
Being taken to different places, having sex with multiple people, forced to do something that you don't want to do.
I was broken, and they took advantage of that.
Well, they would probably think I'm some kind of low-life dirt person, and I didn't come from that,
I carried such a heavy cloak of shame.
Trauma and shame are just two of the reasons human trafficking victims don't come forward. But if and when they do, they can have a real impact on the lives of others by standing up and sharing their stories. That's exactly what these two women are doing, both survivors of sex trafficking, both now supporting other victims struggling to move forward. Fox 43's Alyssa Kratz begins with a story of justice and hope.
Justice Maddox spends her days in Harrisburg helping victims of human trafficking, something that is prevalent across South Central Pennsylvania.
The Highway 30, it runs straight through New York, all the way down to Florida, and people are being victims of a crime that some of them don't even know.
Her nonprofit, Justice House of Hope, works with survivors, finding them safe housing, providing access to education and legal help, and giving them support.
Right now, they might just need someone to talk to. Right now, they might need to just go somewhere to get detox. They might just need for someone just to tell them, we understand. So we help each survivor differently.
The organization's mission is particularly meaningful for Justice. That's because at the age of 12, she became a victim of human trafficking herself.
School started changing, my grades started changing, the way I looked, the way I act, I was always angry.
And after several months, Justice became pregnant with her abuser's child.
My mom allowed me to make that decision to either have an abortion or keep the child. Of course, I wound up keeping my child, and I didn't want my child to know or feel some type of way, so I never told the story.
But as her daughter grew older and learned who her father was, she helped Justice open up about her past.
She was the one that gave me the strength to tell what happened to me and not to hide behind the story, because she thought that my story might save another person's life.
Now the duo works hand in hand, spreading awareness of a problem affecting many others in our communities.
I think that's the part that hurts me the most, that our kids might not know that they're being trafficked.
And spreading a message of justice and hope.
Tell them that we're here, we hear you, we understand you, and it's not your fault. And you don't have to be alone.
Alyssa Kratz, Fox 43 News.
Just like Justice House of Hope, Bravery Mobile Services is working to expose the reality of human trafficking and support the survivors right here in Central Pennsylvania. It starts with addressing the issues that make people the most vulnerable, issues including addiction.
My passion is to see people break free and stay free, whatever that looks like. whatever they're bound to.
Kelly Baldwin has a purpose and a passion, but she went through a lot of pain to get here.
Trauma is at the root of it all.
A teenage mom, Baldwin lost her son's father in a motorcycle accident.
I wanted to seek an outside source that numbed me from my pain, and so I went into active addiction.
Drinking, heroin, crack cocaine, and anything she could get her hands on.
I chose to allow the drug dealers to come into my home because I thought that would be better than being homeless, and it was not.
This is when Baldwin's dealers started selling her for sex.
This sexual trafficking and addiction go hand in hand. It gives them a more of control, and it binds the girls up more, keeps them dependent.
Dependent and vulnerable.
They basically pawned me to get money, and I felt like I was hopeless and had no choice. I was bound to the addiction, and I felt like I was in a continuous cycle of desperation, like there was no way out.
Baldwin did get out, but it was not an easy journey.
The police intervened. My house was a drug fest, and they were watching me, and they busted down my door and took me to jail.
It was during her time in state prison that Baldwin found the solution that finally helped her turn her life around.
Jesus. I literally tried so many ways to heal. I tried rehabs and halfway houses. I tried different programs, and I would get a little bit of time, but at the root of my trauma was never healed.
Her unyielding faith now gives Baldwin the strength to face her past and the courage to embrace a brighter future.
He set me free, and he healed my stony heart, and he set me on a path of purpose.
That purpose is helping others heal from their own grief, addiction, and trauma because, as you've heard, she's experienced and overcome every single one.
When you share your experience, it ignites a hope in them that it's possible for them to also get free. And that's why I share my story.
Through her nonprofit Courage House and now Bravery Mobile Services, Baldwin has spent the last decade spreading a message of hope and healing by meeting people where they are.
We offer soul care counseling, which is dealing with the will, mind, and emotions, so healing at the root of it. We offer recovery coaching for anybody who's coming out of addiction and just wants some coaching on how to live a new lifestyle. And then we have a grief course.
And Baldwin works to provide a safe space by working with her clients inside their comfort zone.
Safety is key. If you don't feel safe, you're not going to open up and be vulnerable. And vulnerability is required for the healing process.
It's a process that never ends. However, every day offers new hope. Baldwin recently got married. She has repaired her relationship with the son she abandoned so many years ago. She has changed the ending to her story, and now she is working to help others do the same.
There is hope if you choose it. Yeah.
From sex trafficking to domestic servitude, next we uncover the world of labor trafficking and the people suffering, sweating, and slaving away with little hope of survival or escape. When you think of human trafficking, forced labor may not be the first thing that comes to your mind. But as we mentioned, it is actually the most common type of human trafficking, and it's becoming more prevalent here in our state. Fox 43's Marshall Keeley finds out why it can be so much harder to detect.
Labor trafficking is often misunderstood and misidentified.
Rhonda Hendrickson, Chief Operating Officer at YWCA Greater Harrisburg, says labor trafficking is increasingly on the organization's radar.
We definitely have seen our services taking, an increase in identifying labor trafficking. We have a fair mix of, migrant workers, domestic servitude, even, families that bring another family member over from, somewhere overseas to work in a business. We see this in massage parlors, and they work off their debt.
Each situation is unique, but labor trafficking can begin with a migrant worker who's offered a job that includes housing, only to find out they are not being paid for their work. Labor trafficking can also take place within a marriage, where a spouse is not paid for their work in a family business. These situations can be hard to spot because the work appears routine, but there can be clues something else is going on.
You know, you're getting your nails done weekly, but you see the same people working, maybe cleaning the sinks, cleaning the floors. Maybe there's some evidence that people are actually sleeping there. Are they being forced to do labor work? Are they being paid fair wages? Are they being given, you know, a break? Do they work 7 days a week and they get little pay that then they owe somebody else who provided them an opportunity to get this job?
Many labor trafficking victims may also be experiencing sex trafficking.
If a victim has to work 15 or 20 hours a day, which is very common, 7 days a week, and they're being mistreated and abused and exploited, the trauma becomes compounded on a daily basis.
YWCA Greater Harrisburg works alongside other agencies, training individuals to identify labor trafficking while helping victims get out of and recover from this type of abuse.
Raising awareness is vital, but what we want to do is prevent it from even happening in the first place.
Hendrickson does not want residents to put themselves in harm's way, but encourages anyone with information about possible labor trafficking to report it through the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Marshall Keeley, Fox 43 News.
One of the most common components and saddest sides of human trafficking is that it typically begins with a family member, friend, or someone the victim learns to trust.
With familial trafficking, everything looks normal. That's the whole thing.
But it's anything but normal. The warning signs one survivor says teachers, friends, and healthcare providers need to be aware of. Plus, reaching out to those that are too afraid to speak up.
This is underreported because of the shame that is involved with it.
The agencies in our area working together to help victims and survivors step out of the shadows.
And for a human, for a human body, it can be used over and over again. Unlike a drug, you take it once, it's gone. So the average person who's dealing with sex trafficking is 11 to 37 buyers a day.
Shocking statistics that reveal a troubling truth. Human trafficking is a reality, not only on the other side of the world, but right here in our own backyards. Thanks for staying with us. I'm Amy Lutz. In the past half hour, we've introduced you to survivors of sex trafficking, explored the growing problem of forced labor, and explained why many victims never come forward. The details may be disturbing, but they are also important to hear. Here in central Pennsylvania and other rural parts of the country, trafficking is real, and it is most likely to begin with betrayal. Fox 43's Marshall Keeley introduces us to a woman whose abuse started inside her own home at the hands of someone she trusted.
Starting out my childhood from very early on was just a barrage of abuse, different types of abuse.
Sarah Isaac Samuel grew up in fear of her father and stepmother. At home, the Pennsylvania native faced physical violence at every turn. School offered no exit from her nightmare. In first grade, she told a teacher her parents were not feeding her or her siblings.
They called home and, asked my stepmom about it. And then when I got home for lunch that day, there was a whole incident that took place, which gave me a huge heads up that it wasn't safe to talk to anybody at school because they talked to my parents.
Isaac Samuel says she was first sexually abused at 4 years old. By the age of 10, she faced a new horror. Sarah's bus driver started molesting her regularly, both on the bus and in his home. She didn't know it at the time, but it was all orchestrated by Isaac Samuel's own stepmother, who would often take her to the bus driver's house. The bus driver was paying her stepmother for access.
She was making arrangements with him to take me to his house. Sometimes he would pick me up, doing sexual things with me. He got permission to actually keep me on the bus after all the other students had gone off. He would actually force me to sit in the front seat where he was fondling me on the bus.
She tried to escape the abuse, often hiding in large pipes under the road and waiting for the bus to go by. But when her parents would find out she wasn't at school, it meant more violence at home. The trafficking went on for 2 years.
With familial trafficking, everything looks normal. That's the whole thing. They try to make it look as if nothing is going on. It's happening everywhere.
Familial trafficking definitely is something that we've been talking a lot about, especially in PA, where you have rural areas, and that's where familial trafficking you'll see most often.
Zozan Kuchakaiden is the Anti-Human Trafficking Services Coordinator at the Pennsylvania Coalition Against Rape. She says Sarah's story is not uncommon. Traffickers are looking to fill a need, she says, whether it's substances, food, or money, and they often exploit the people they're closest to.
It's really just about getting what they need in that moment, and if it takes, putting someone else into that situation to get that, that's what they'll do.
While they can be hard to spot, Kuchakaiden says PCAR often speaks to law enforcement, healthcare workers, and schools about the signs of familial human trafficking.
The withdrawal, the inattentiveness, any kind of sign that they're fearful or submissive, these sorts of things you can report.
Isaac Samuel says the signs were there, and Children and Youth Services even paid them a visit. Her parents, she says, knew it was coming, making the home and family look perfect for a day. CYS asked the children about the abuse in front of their parents. Fearing retaliation, Sarah and her siblings denied it, and the worker left.
They always went back to my step-parents, or my dad and my stepmom, and got information from them, which they're the ones that were actually perpetrating the issues, the abuse onto us. I think that people need to start listening to children and not see their outward behaviors as a problem, but as a sign that something else is happening.
It would take decades for Isaac Samuel to fully face her traumatic childhood. Her book, A Journey Back to Restoration, took 7 years to complete.
During the whole process of writing it, there was a lot of healing because a lot of different moments were brought up in my life that I had forgotten about. My goal is to reach as many people as I can, raise as much awareness as I can, and provide as much help as I can.
As part of that help, Sarah and her husband took in 37 foster children over 2 decades, many of whom experienced the same difficult realities.
At least 17 of them, they have some form of sexual abuse. Of those 17, 8 are boys. And of those 8 boys, every single one of them were sexually abused by a male figure in their life. So it's not just a girl problem. It is a guy problem too.
My dad worked outside of the home. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And as we got older, I was 8 years old, and my older brother sexually abused me.
A central Pennsylvania native, Brent says his brother abused him for 2 years. He'd find the courage to stand up to his brother and stop the abuse, but he kept it all a secret. His pain and unresolved feelings led to a pornography addiction. It was only when he faced his past and found help that he began to heal.
In Pennsylvania, there's a lot of good counselors, and there's a lot of great programs, and so they really helped me out. It really helped me to talk through everything.
Brent met Sarah by accident, and after some conversation, each shared their story.
People do really bad things to people, and to people who they profess to love, right? Their own blood. And so it cemented in my mind and in my heart that I can't know about these things that are happening and not doing anything about it.
The two teamed up to make a difference. They've been invited to speak at events all over the world. Brent now runs a ministry that supports survivors and prepares people in the medical field to identify trafficking and abuse. Isaac Samuel leads an art class that gives survivors a safe space to talk and a creative way to express their emotions on paper or canvas. She realized the power of painting while working with one of her foster children.
He said he feels like a volcano ready to erupt. And he said he has so much darkness in his life, and these little yellow dots represented all of the people who were in his life. But these 2 big ones represented my husband and I, because we were the first people who actually believed him. He said nobody believed him. And if you heard his story, there is nothing but trauma in his life.
Survivors of abuse.
He did this portion of the picture, and I did this portion of the picture.
Pushing forward together.
And so it's kind of like going from darkness to light.
But what will it take to keep people out of the darkness?
From a larger standpoint, it's about addressing those systemic issues like homelessness and substance abuse and lack of employment opportunities, access to proper health care and education. And that's really where it starts.
It would also take a change in mentality.
We can't stop trafficking until we address the abuse that occurs in our communities and that broader cultural context in which it occurs.
They supply it because people demand it. And in the United States, we are the #1 demander of sex with children in the world.
It is definitely happening here in Pennsylvania. It's a scary thought that it won't go away.
Marshall Keeley, Fox 43 News.
Well, more than 68% of trafficking victims are seen at an emergency department, and that is why healthcare workers are vital partners in the fight against human trafficking. And as we found out, a person's life expectancy can actually be impacted by the treatment they receive when they finally seek care.
Some studies saying like you lose 20 years on your lifespan without appropriate intervention and support through these traumatic events.
Emily Huggins is the manager of the Forensic Examiner program at WellSpan York Hospital. The program began in 1988 and has really grown since the early 2000s.
Abuse and trauma is a root cause of health disparity. So we wanted to try to do better.
And they have, with many updates being made to the unit over the years with domestic violence and human trafficking victims in mind.
We need to first realize that these things happen. We need to recognize when we're seeing the signs in our patients, and we need to react in a way that isn't going to re-traumatize the patient.
That includes offering victims a safe and secure space here in the Forensic Examiner suite, away from the chaotic emergency department. Staff is specially trained to handle the immediate physical and emotional concerns a patient may have. WellSpan offers online courses for all employees to learn about what signs to look for in trafficking victims. Those warning signs are many, but include appearing malnourished, showing signs of physical injuries and abuse, avoiding eye contact, social interaction or law enforcement, lacking identification, or having poor physical or dental health.
There is not one agency in our community that can do it all. So we have developed trusted partnerships with organizations like the YWCA of York.
Crystal Perry is the Human Trafficking Advocacy Coordinator at the YW of York. She goes into businesses and schools teaching about the warning signs.
It seems like every time we do a training with a different agency, within a week or two, they're identifying something.
She says it's important that people understand anyone can become a victim.
I've had people that were making 6 figures lose their jobs and ended up getting trafficked because of their situation.
Approaching care from a trauma-informed standpoint, both organizations hope to spread the word that human trafficking does exist in our area and has for some time.
It's always been here, but now because of education and knowledge, there's more of a light on it.
From the immediate physical and emotional health care concerns to the longer-term mental health and substance abuse issues, trafficking survivors often need a complex array of health care services, and providers are stepping up to make sure they are prepared, as are other agencies across the state.
Law enforcement, mental health, medical recovery service providers, and the criminal justice system, that we can all come together and let York County know the dangers of trafficking.
The hope on the horizon as our community comes together to battle back.
What makes it so important is that we're talking about people. Sometimes I think when we assign numbers and we say things like 1 in 4 people are going to be the victim of a sexual assault, and we look at the dollars, the amount of money that people spend buying and selling people, particularly children, for sexual gratification, sometimes I think it takes away from the humanity.
Keeping in mind the human in human trafficking. Now, at this point, you may be asking yourself, why don't more victims come forward, scream, yell, fight for their freedom? It's not an easy answer. One of the big problems in fighting human trafficking is that the person being trafficked grows to depend on their trafficker.
The victim will solely rely on the trafficker, and that's how they can maintain control. and isolate their victims. Their trafficker is giving them food, shelter, taking care of them in a sense.
Each case is unique. Every story is different. There is no exact profile to help identify a victim. In fact, there are cases where the victim doesn't even realize they're being trafficked.
Victims rarely ever self-identify as a victim. Then there's the problems that they do face with addiction and then their own trauma in their past that they don't necessarily feel comfortable coming out and speaking on. And it makes it difficult for law enforcement to investigate the cases.
This is why it is so important to understand this is happening here in central Pennsylvania. Be able to recognize the warning signs and speak up if you sense something's off. So far, we have detailed the issue of human trafficking in PA, shared firsthand stories from victims, and explained why it is such an underreported crime. Now, Fox 43's Logan Perrone explains how agencies across our state are working together to make a positive impact in the fight against trafficking.
Every so often, big arrests make our local headlines as law enforcement agencies crack down on human trafficking in central Pennsylvania. However, human trafficking is a more frequent and urgent problem than portrayed in the media.
I think everybody wants to believe what they see on TV, these big sting operations where you bust these things. Do they happen? Absolutely. Is that the most common way that law enforcement comes into contact with victims of human trafficking? Absolutely not.
A collection of agencies and organizations make up York County's Human Trafficking Task Force.
York County Human Trafficking Task Force is a holistic approach that is comprised of different agencies such as law enforcement, mental health, medical, recovery, service providers, and the criminal justice system, that we can all come together and let York County know the dangers of trafficking and how to fight the battle, if you will.
Each member of the task force plays a different role to give a wide range of solutions to the complex issue.
What of our task force partners can we activate to help this person, whether it's drug and alcohol, mental health? How can we get this person services that may help them?
Once a direction is identified, Hummel says the task force can adjust if needed.
It varies case by case and individual by individual. It really just depends on what arena and what stage that our client is in, or our victim or survivor, and whatever the client needs at that particular time. And that changes daily. It can change hourly from what they need.
Aside from local task forces, state agencies, such as PennDOT and the Office of the Victim Advocate, are also working to bring public awareness.
Transportation is, how victims get moved around on our transportation networks. Transportation agencies and DOTs are in a really unique position to be able to try to help.
Teaching employees working directly with the public on how to spot red flags is just one simple way of addressing the problem.
We've trained our frontline staff at the driver license centers to spot signs of potential trafficking, and we've trained it's part of the onboarding process for new staff, and all of our existing staff have been trained as well.
PennDOT is also finding ways to inform the public. This includes sharing information at places that see constant foot traffic, like service plazas on the Pennsylvania Turnpike.
So the more that we can help make sure people know what to look for potentially, then the more likely it is to help make a difference and help somebody out if they need help.
Other campaigns, such as the PA Office of Victim Advocates awareness launch in 2022, are signs of task forces working with state and local agencies to expand public awareness.
I think the biggest part of what we try to do is collaborate. There are many people involved in Pennsylvania that want to see this stop, and that's great because it is going to take all of us as a community.
This is why our task force is created. We just really want to let the community know the dangers, what to look for.
Estrella emphasizes the importance of exposing communities to the reality of human trafficking and its impacts.
It's important that we bring this to the forefront, bring this to the table in Pennsylvania, because it's happening to our children. It's happening to our sisters and our brothers, and that's what makes it so valuable. Whether it's 1 or 10,000, it shouldn't be happening.
Kraska says the task force and other localized efforts are having a positive effect, even if it doesn't always make the front page of the paper.
I think if we take successful prosecution is the only measurement of our success as a task force, we are short-sighting ourselves on the great things that we're doing to help victims and get victims the services that they need that may not necessarily end in that result.
Logan Perrone, Fox 43 News.
When we come back, one last look at the warning signs to watch for and the resources available right here in Central Pennsylvania.
Every story looks different. TV shows sex trafficking as being this one thing. It looks like this, but that is such a lie because my story didn't look like that. It looked like my story. I was being forced to do sexual things with my body that I did not want to against my own self-will for the promotion of making money for somebody else.
She was making arrangements with him to take me to his house. Sometimes he would pick me up, you know, doing sexual things with me. I didn't know all the details of this until I was older.
So I think that's the part that hurts me the most, that our kids might not know that they're being trafficked.
That's why I do what I do, because I want people to be educated, to know the signs and know that there's resources. And I don't want to just talk it, I want to walk it.
We introduced you to Jennifer Foxworthy at the start of our program, a retired Navy airman, a motivational speaker, an author, a domestic violence survivor, and a victim advocate. Now, Foxworthy travels the country sharing her story and spreading a message of hope and empowerment.
It really is filling when I hear their story and what they're saying and going through.
The Unstoppable You Conference was recently back in York County. In addition to Jennifer's own inspirational story, the sold-out crowd heard from survivors, thrivers, and experts right here in our community on ways to escape the trauma that's holding them back and embrace a future full of hope and empowerment.
So I need everybody right from the community. Let's come together and impart that wisdom and love on one another. I just want to see it grow and blossom and lives to be changed.
Foxworthy hopes every participant takes away an ability to move towards self-care and wellness, no matter their past, no matter their trials, no matter how many times they've fallen.
I'm not alone. I have resources. I am loved. I am valued.
As you have heard over the past hour, anyone can be a victim of human trafficking, and all of us have the power to help stop it. While some victims may be kept behind locked doors, many more are hidden in plain sight on our farms, in our restaurants, nail salons, massage parlors, and hotels. Others are trapped in invisible cages, walking college campuses, being rented out by parents or family members, and may not even know that they're being trafficked. You also have to remember that traffickers use coercion and threats so effectively that even if you identify a victim, they may be too afraid to accept your help. That is why it is so important to listen to your gut and report suspected cases of abuse and trafficking. And this is how you do it. The National Human Trafficking Hotline at 1-888-373-7888. The toll-free number is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. People who speak multiple languages are standing by, waiting and hoping that you will call. Whether you're a victim, want to report a tip, or just learn more about the issue by connecting with anti-trafficking services in our area, all you have to do is pick up the phone. We end our program tonight with a message of hope, courtesy of the Office for Victims of Crime. This video demonstrates the resilience of survivors all across the country and lessons they're now sharing to support others. Again, thanks for joining us, and good night.
Being a survivor is a continuous thing. We need to provide them with tools, coping skills to continue working on themselves. We really need to help people in that transition time find themselves. And that's when people come into their lives and say, well, can I help you? Can I walk the walk with you? and help you find out who you are again. What do you want to do in life? What do you want to be in life now that you're free, that you own your body?